So many moms feel stuck and isolated, like they've got to keep it all together and can't say how hard it really is. On Let's Get Real, we talk about the real stuff, motherhood, mental health, and everything in between, so you don't feel like you have to carry it alone anymore. Because in order to heal, we have to get real. If you're feeling overwhelmed, grab the Overwhelmed Moms Guide. It's totally free and made to help you feel like yourself again. The link is in the show notes. Let's jump in. Many women know what it's like to wake up one day and realize they've lost themselves somewhere along the way, in the giving, the surviving, or the trying to hold it all together. Today's guest, Julie Barth, is a writer, mom of 6, trauma survivor, and founder of the Colin James Barth Outreach, a nonprofit that supports women in crisis. After years of emotional and financial abuse, Julie had to start completely over, rebuilding her sense of safety, confidence, and self-worth. In this conversation, we're unpacking what rebuilding after emotional abuse actually looks like, how to recognize the signs, release shame, and slowly reclaim your voice, your peace, and your power. Julie, thank you so much for being here and being willing to have this conversation as we get to dive into emotional abuse and what it looks like to be able to heal and rebuild after that.
Thanks for having me, Jenna. I'm excited myself, so thank you for having me on.
Yes, well, thank you. As we get started, can you tell us a little bit about your story that has led you to the work that you are doing today?
I've had everybody's got a backstory, so I don't want to say that mine's extremely extraordinary, but it just seems like throughout my entire life, I've gone from one rebuild to the next. And it's never really, before the second situation, it's always been about someone else in my world coming into a crash situation. I have a special needs daughter who is now 24, but when she was born, she had something called primordial dwarfism, but we didn't know what that looked like or what it was. So when she came out, it was really a lot of the medical stuff we were dealing with really stemmed from medical malpractice that we didn't know about. So,
oh my gosh.
And I was married to my grammar school sweetheart. We met in like 3rd grade. He was my first kiss in 6th grade. But he, we met back up again after college and in a bar in Chicago. And it was like we instantly, I felt like I had found the piece of me that I didn't even know was missing. He was just kind of like, that best friend you run into and you're like, what did I do before there was you?
Yeah.
So we ended up having our first son and moving back to the same suburbs that we started where we met. And again, then we had my special needs daughter. So we had my oldest, it was like 5 years of traveling around with Tatum, who's our special needs daughter. Finally, we were getting her to a point where we knew she was going to live. She was doing really well, she had laryngeal reconstructive airway. Things seemed to be on an uptick. So I just wanted a big family, and we added 2 more to our brood. And when my youngest was about 6 months, we always had this huge Halloween party because we were really big in the community that we lived, of course, with all these kids. And he just wasn't behaving like himself. He was a trader down at the Board of Trade in Chicago, and where he was usually sarcastic and could roll with anything. He just seemed very detached and wasn't himself at all. So,
and this is your son or your husband?
My husband.
Oh, okay.
So I said to him, as any good wife does, go figure it out. Go to the hospital and don't, because he had been back and forth to the doctors, and the doctors, I think they dismiss men anyway. And they kept giving him Carafate and antacids and saying you're under a whole bunch of stress. But just nothing was ringing true. So we were having this huge Halloween party, and I said, go figure it out. And within 4 hours, we found out that he had an inoperable pancreatic tumor.
Oh my gosh.
Tumor in his pancreas, yeah. So here we were with, 4 little kids, and he was, like I said, a trader, but he didn't have vacation pay or any kind of benefits. So we were very blessed in that the community really stepped up and just, never made sure that we were taken care of and never made us really want for anything.
Wow. That's amazing.
At the time they found it, they said he had like 2 weeks to live. So,
oh my gosh, that is crazy. Shocking.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was. Yeah. I mean, here we were coming off of Tatum, and, they said take him home and let him say goodbye to his kids. But his mother had ovarian cancer, and it was linked genetically. And at one point, she was the oldest surviving ovarian cancer patient. So I think that both of us kind of believed that he could do it too. And unfortunately, he didn't. We lost him in 2009. So it was about a 16-month battle of, taking care of caregiving him and the 4 kids. And so it was a rough road. And I came out of it kind of in a fog and bounced right into the second situation, which is what I'm here to talk about, basically.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more after that? In the midst of, I mean, I'm picturing having some sense of relief with Tatum, and it's in a form of stability is what I'm thinking. Maybe having some, okay, like we kind of have our feet under us a little bit more. There's some sense of stability. We know, what we're working with. There's some medical care here. She's going to, like, that's kind of what I'm imagining, only to then come with another wave of shock, of unknown, of this like rattling. And then here you are in the midst of that is very quick to have it boom, where I would think you would just be in survival mode of trying to just keep 4 young kids alive and 1 with special needs. And then as a caregiver to your husband who's slowly dying, I can't, the after effects of all of that, it would take so long, I would think, for your heart to catch up and to even have space to grieve. I don't know when or where you would find that. That's a lot.
I really didn't. I think that was the problem. I always say to people that like those things that serve us so well, because I've always been very good. I was the youngest, just my sister and I, but I was always a peacemaker in my house. I didn't grow up in a house that everyone got along. I'll just leave it at that. So my entire world was really about bouncing and navigating and are you okay? Are you, making sure everyone was okay. And so that's what my adult life became, like making sure that the kids didn't see Colin, making sure that Colin didn't see the kids. So yeah, coming off of the normalcy that we were able to create with Tatum, because she had a trach. And when we got the trach out, we were like, we're going to travel. I can honestly say, not only do I not remember a good majority of, because when you look at the span of it, Tatum was born in 2001. We lost Colin in 2009. So it was really a 9-year span of, I don't know that I ever made any conscious decisions. Everything was reactive. Everything was, I didn't have time to sit back, and people are always like, how'd you do it? You don't, you just do.
Yeah.
The things that got me through all those times, which a lot of people are like, I don't know how you do it. But after Colin passed, I kept up with those same defense mechanisms and didn't see that they were causing a problem in my life, that I was failing to like really acknowledge things that where everyone was like, slow down, take time to grieve. I'd been in caregiving him for 16 months. So when everybody else just started grieving, I was like, I lost a piece of him every day. So I kind of was like, I can't sit in this anymore. So there was a gentleman who worked in my home, and he was significantly younger than me. And I'd always wanted to have a big family. And he was the exact opposite of me, where I've always felt very guided by responsibilities and doing the right thing and what people think of me. He, didn't have any of those things. He really didn't care what people thought of him. He liked to incite people. And I guess at that moment in my life, it seemed so freeing. I was like, you mean you can say whatever you want and nobody cares? Or you don't care about how people feel about you. And I had been through 9 years of really just feeling like I was either the special needs mom, or I was the widow, or I was the woman with a dying husband. So just the allure of not caring, moving on with life and becoming someone other than who I was, saddled with all of these memories and baggage, really just seemed so incredibly alluring. And although everyone else was saying, slow down, process, I didn't want to. It just made more sense and he was just fine if I didn't ever want to speak about anything, where I thought he was giving me space and giving me time to heal. It wasn't till later on, when I was really stuck in it, that I recognized it wasn't an act. He wasn't doing it for my benefit. He just really didn't care at all about how I felt, and was just absolutely fine if I just never wanted to talk at all.
Wow. Yeah. So, oh my gosh. what a contrast to jump into that. And yeah, I could see how it's almost like I need a way to soften the blow of the pain that I'm in. And I don't know. Where do I find the time? Where do I find the space to deal with it? It's like been such a long journey. And then to find someone where it's like, hey, this is the complete opposite. And how can I basically approach life like this, but then not realizing it until later that sounds like an unhealthy person, probably toxic, and
Yes.
those situations that then it takes time for that kind of thing to unfold and realize. And often when it does, we're in this pretty deep, and then it's really hard to get out of that. So in this relationship, what made you realize that you were losing yourself? And I know you've talked about how it was an abusive relationship. And so if you kind of want to go in and expand a little bit more on that and what this relationship looked like, that I think it'd be really helpful.
So when I lost Colin, I think, what do they say? Like 80% of all you do is subconscious. So I think that, I had spent my entire late 20s, early 30s caregiving, and I just wanted to completely start over. And as I said, I knew right out the gate that he was not good for me. People are always like, what are the red flags? I think that you know them, but for whatever reason, you choose not to acknowledge them. And like you said, then you're so far in, you don't see a way out. But, I wanted to get out of where I was at. I was tired of saying I'm Julie Barth, and everyone was like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Aww.
Yeah. So, he offered me a way to just start over. If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. And I was like, oh, good. Then I'll just change my name. I'll move cross country. I'll leave my past in my past. And I really didn't want anyone to take Colin's spot. It was like I wasn't ready to relinquish his seat. So the fact that he didn't really like children wasn't a problem, because then I wasn't going to fight over who wanted to parent or him trying to take someone else's place. And again, these are all subconscious things that I didn't see until way later. It just seemed like I could have my life with him, which was fun and whatever we wanted to do, and abandonment. And then I could have my life with my children where I could be fun mom and show them happiness and be with them. And I was lucky enough to not have to go back to work. So it gave me freedom. And so we chose to move, and there was a house that was in the middle of nowhere. I don't think, I knew it was way too remote for me, but it was exactly what he wanted. So at that point, I really didn't want to fight about it. And I kind of was like, well, good. I don't really want to be around people. I don't want to tell my story. I just kind of wanted to like pack it all away and figure out a way to just become someone who I wasn't. And as much as I tried, good or bad, you can't change who you are. You might be able to take a vacation from them, or to fool yourself into thinking that you're okay being someone other than who you are, and hiding that part of you that's so prominent. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So I enjoyed it for as long as it served me well. And then after we got to North Carolina, we had another daughter, and my special needs daughter, who was at the time 13, who had been through all the surgeries, we found out that she had a rare connective tissue cancer, completely unrelated to her start. Yeah. And so feeling the gravity of being in a strange town where, when I was at home, Colin had brothers and sisters, and I had my family, and he had his family. And here we were stuck up on a mountain, with, at that point, 5 children. Tatum, who's going through surgery after surgery, because the only removal of the type of cancer she had was literal removal. So,
wow.
Yeah, she went through, I want to say like 8 or 9 surgeries, where they had to cut off her, right side torso, skin and bone, and then graft her legs. And I think it was, I saw it creeping before then, but it was really at that point when I looked around and I recognized I was completely on my own.
Wow.
Doing it alone. Not only, it went from doing it on my own to recognizing that not only was I doing it on my own and managing, but he was sabotaging every part of it that he could whenever he could to make it that much worse for me.
And you could see that at that point, that he was intentionally trying to, or started to see some of this.
I don't know that I ever saw it as intentional until really, we went to get divorced and the veil came off and I found out all the things he did. I think that I knew that they were going on, but, I think when that of secrecy and sabotage and maliciousness is going on with somebody that you claim to love or claims to love you, you almost convince yourself that it can't be true. Like, I remember thinking, like, is he cheating on me? And then I was like, no, he would never do that. So whatever it was that was right in front of my face, if I didn't want to come to terms with it, I would just rationalize it or say, that's ridiculous. Like, he would never, steal your engagement ring and have a fake one made, or, whatever the craziness was.
Yeah.
If you acknowledge it and it becomes real, then you're forced to do something about it. And then that is really the problem, because as long as you say it's not happening, you don't have to address it.
That is such a good point. The denial piece is what helps us to stay and endure the relationship. Hadn't heard that phrased in that way, but yeah, once it is acknowledged, once this is named, it is seeing that now something has to be done, right? And a lot of times it's not knowing what the next thing is. Like, what is it that has to be done? And then you're met with fear, self-doubt, like questioning all of this. So I'm thinking kind of like what you said before of how people will ask you what the red flags are. It's like intuitively there's a sense of knowing, but somewhere along the way we learned to not trust ourselves anymore, or that was so discounted that we doubt. And yet that's still there. Like, if you reflect back and you're like, okay, these were the things I knew at that time, I couldn't get myself to acknowledge it. So for women who are quietly enduring emotional or financial abuse, what are some of the subtle signs that something isn't right?
Well, I think that the key point in what you just said is nothing seems to make sense in your world, then there's a problem. If you've always known yourself to be, if everything you've always known reality to be no longer makes any sense and you're confused all the time, you can't make sense of what's going on around you. That is their way, is that they keep you unsteady. They keep you guessing. And predictability is something that we crave so much as human beings, because if it's predictable, we can manage it, or we think we can manage it. So I think when something spirals out of control, you want to put it back into the confines of normalcy so you can manage it again. But I think what you end up doing is downplaying or not acknowledging or making light of something, and really numbing yourself to it, because it is overwhelming to figure out what you're going to do. And at the same time, you're guessing yourself. I can't tell you how many times I was like, am I crazy? Like, how did this go sideways so quickly when I had a plan and I approached it the same way I did everything else before I knew him? But it was always 180 degree difference. And I was left like, what happened here? I don't understand how I got here. So then you just try and, convert it around again and, put it in little packages so that you once again feel like, okay, I can manage it again. Now it makes sense. But what you're doing is you're giving up your instincts, you're giving up your intuition, and you're definitely giving up your sense of sensibility in what you're doing. So, they beat you down, they tell you you're crazy, and then you do crazy things. And it just reinforces this notion of, I'm broken. There's definitely something wrong with me.
Yeah, and it's amazing how quickly we personalize that, take it all on as it's completely our responsibility. We are the one causing this, when it's like, actually, there's a crazy maker that is instigating this. But it's hard. It's just so much easier to turn on ourselves and to doubt us than the person we're with. It's like something with the way we're trying to survive that situation. Something that you said really stood out to me as far as the confusion. Like, if it's constantly confusing, something is up, right?
Yeah.
This living in a perpetual state of confusion. And I'm just thinking of a particular relationship that was really unhealthy and very toxic. And that confusion was all the time. Nothing ever made sense. Like up from down, it always was changing, and it was always to that person's benefit. So it would be twisted, and it was whatever benefited them at the time. Then if you would bring it up and be like, but you just said X, Y, and Z, even if it's earlier that day, they will completely deny it, flip it on you and be like, absolutely, that's not at all what I said. So it's just this it is crazy making.
It's literally maddening. Yeah.
It is maddening. And then you think that it's something with you. It's just like, it's such a complex situation. I'm then thinking of the situation that you're describing of going from living and having this tight-knit community of people that you could rely on and depend on and who supported you during that time with Colin. And then to this situation where it's like you're tucked up and away and he's just completely taking advantage and manipulating the situation, where you are pulled away from that support group, from the people that could really help you discern what's true and what reality actually is. Like that makes it even harder to not have those people, readily available.
Well, just, and maybe, I don't know if you can slice this in, but I think when you were saying, like, I don't know why you feel like you can fix it, I feel as if the only person we know we realistically can control is ourselves. We know, and I think that that's why we're like, okay, well, if we just fix us, then everything else will fall into line, because you feel out of control if you can't fix it. I can't tell you how many times I went to counseling or tried something new, or was always trying to make it work on my end, not seeing that that's exactly what he didn't want, that he kept throwing wrenches into it to make sure that it wasn't successful.
Exactly. I think that's a really good point to bring up, because so I know as a recovering codependent, my tendency was to actually focus and try to control others and their emotions, and then what they were feeling, what they were like, how they were doing, and then realizing I can't do that. So then turning it to what can I control? It is me. But then it crossed over to taking on total responsibility for me and the other person, when it's like, actually, that's not how this works. They are responsible for themselves. And just kind of coming to that place of like, oh, there's this whole equation here. I'm one part of it. And if this person isn't going to do their part, then I can't fix it. I can't make it work. But it's kind of, I know for myself, has been such a teasing out to figure, and yeah, just how easy it is to be overly responsible and take on so much more than what is actually ours. Why do so many of us downplay or excuse emotional abuse when it's happening to us?
Because I think you would have to do something about it. As a mom, I knew it was going on, but I was pretending that I was managing it all and no one was getting hurt. Maybe me, I was just hurting myself, and I could live with me getting hurt. But if I had to look at the whole picture and recognize that other people were getting hurt, and not only were other people getting hurt, but there's the potential that other people could get even more hurt, or that people would see what I did, or because you do stupid things to try and make relationships work. And sometimes when you expose somebody who's abusing you, you have to expose yourself for all the dumb decisions you made, or actions you took, or the ways that you behaved that weren't like yourself. So I think you keep it hidden, just thinking, I don't want anyone to know. I don't want them to know what's going on in my house. I don't want them to know what I did. And I don't want people to think poorly of me. That was a big driving force. I don't want people to think I'm stupid. I don't want people to know that I let him be mean to my children. Whatever it was, you have to expose yourself. Yeah. So you stay in what you're doing, because again, it feels manageable. Even if it's not, you've convinced yourself, if I just do this, then this will happen.
Yeah. Right. I can see that, how it's like finding these ways to control the situation that feels so big and out of control. And I hadn't thought about the reality of revealing the ugliness that's been going on in the relationship and with them. It also is going to reveal some of the ugliness within yourself of what's been going on. And that's really hard to look at. It's really hard to look at just with your partner, let alone for yourself. Like we will do almost anything to hide and be like anything to not have to face it and feel it and deal with it. And especially when it gets exposed to other people for so many fears.
I did a podcast a little bit ago, and someone in the comments, it was some guy in the comments said, she is crazy, that poor man. And it just took my breath away. And, here's this random person I don't even know who's judging me on the internet. And if I'm so worried about somebody I don't even know, that's like 10 times with the people that I did know that they were going to find out that or judge me as being crazy. That was like my worst fear.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. There's a lot, like the judgment of what being defined as like almost like a villain or something awful. And you're like, that's the very thing I've been terrified of that I've wanted to not turn into. So I can't imagine, if they think that or call it out, then like, does that make it true? When it doesn't. In these unhealthy, toxic relationships, it brings out this ugliness, and and I think just having that perspective too, like, anybody that's in that situation, there are things that will come out that is just brought up regardless of trying your best to keep it together. It's just kind of part of being in these really toxic relationships. So what would you say gave you the courage to finally take that first step towards leaving?
I think we split. The average woman takes 7 times to leave, or really anyone to leave a toxic relationship. So we split up for about 6 months. And during that period, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, where I used to like run 10 miles every other day. It got to the point where I literally couldn't get out of bed. I was taking muscle relax. It was so bad that, I was so locked up that my spine was starting to twist and all of these horrible things. Well, he left me. And within, I want to say, he left for almost 6 months. And within the first 3 to 4 weeks, I was back to running 5 miles a day again. I was myself again. It was like immediate. But he came back and he said, well, if you're going to keep begging me to get back together, then I guess then we can. And I knew that it wasn't right. I knew I should have said no, because I was beginning to see all the ways that he was such a cancer in our home to me. But, he always had this way to be this like, poor me, and I'm so misunderstood. And, I'm going to lead this family. I'm going to turn it around. And just like was so like sad that I was like, oh, I don't want him to be sad. So I let him come back into the house. And I had at that time, a 16-year-old son who, if anybody was the brunt of all of his abuse, it was my son. Mm-hmm. And he finally came to me. He didn't talk to me for probably weeks. And he finally came to me and he said, like, I don't understand why you keep letting him come back. I don't understand. He's threatening to kill me. He's threatening to kill you. I've lost my childhood. I don't leave my room. And I don't know why you keep letting him come back. And it was in that moment that I knew, as I said, I thought I was protecting everybody and being the buffer and doing such a great job hiding it all. But really all I was doing was convincing my children that their experience was not real, that they were being, I was gaslighting them to the same degree that I was being gaslit. Oh, he was just teasing. He didn't mean it. You're being overly sensitive, whatever it was. I was doing to my children the exact same thing he was doing to me to a certain degree. And that's at that point where I felt if I didn't think I deserved better, because I really at the time didn't, then I at least knew my children did. And that was kind of the beginning of the end.
Wow. I haven't thought about how the gaslighting could be, it's done differently, but it's that similar feeling of creating the confusion. And it's out of this, you trying to protect and being like, I'm trying to hide these really painful, harmful things going on from you. Yet kids, they're like, well, I know something's up. I can see or what's going on. And then not realizing that out of you're trying to protect them and keep them safe, and being like the buffer, they're like, actually, it's creating that confusion again. And now I don't know. I hadn't thought about that, how it could be, there's some kind of a parallel, but it's just done different.
Yeah.
differently and with
Yeah,
a
I
different
agree.
motive. It's not like to manipulate and control. It is for the abuser. It's to try and protect and be like, how do I do this? How do I protect my kids from such a devastating situation?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that as adults, we don't understand that we try and tell kids what they should feel because we kind of feel like that's our job to calm things down but really when we do that, all we do is negate their own experience. And I really saw it when I finally did go for divorce. He came back, sued me, said that I was an adulterer, said that I was alienating the children. He was at fault for nothing. I was just a terrible drug addict, alcoholic, whatever.
Yeah.
And the court was going to order something, well, did eventually, something called reunification counseling. And I would get into arguments with my lawyer every time they said that. I was like, why are we calling it? And she hated me for obvious reasons. She was like, can't you just go with it? But I said, why do we keep calling it reunification counseling? I'm all on board. I would love my children need therapy. Therapy is great. But why is the goal of it to reunify them with their dad before you even know, first of all, that anything was unionized to begin with, because it was never there to begin with. And secondly, why are we going to teach our children to overlook their feelings and their experience and how they relate to another parent? Because that's what we do. We come in and we say, you have to see them on Friday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'm not saying that alienation doesn't occur. I'm not saying that, parents bad-mouthing the other parent obviously is never a good situation. But the goal of therapy should not right out the gate be reunification. And that kind of goes along with the whole abuse. You come out of it. Now your children are being forced into therapy that I feel the goal is wrong. You're being told that you're the bad guy. And people wonder why you stay in these situations. And the reality is because it's going to get harder before it gets easier. And as long as you feel something is manageable, the thought of it becoming worse and really losing control of whatever you think you have and it being something bigger than what you're dealing with in that moment is so anxiety and fear provoking that you pretty much will stay in trying to manage very extreme situations that you shouldn't. But the brain is just trying to protect you and save you and keep you safe. And you don't feel safe when things aren't the way that you want them to be.
Yes. Wow. 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 What a great way to explain that. And I had not thought about what the goal of therapy should be, especially in a situation like this. If they're saying it's basically trying to force an outcome that you also they don't have control over. And what a disservice it does to our kids who just need space and time to be like, here's what my experience was. This is what I feel. This is what I've gone through. And they need that sense of validation of not being told their feelings are wrong or they should feel X, Y, and Z, but also help and guidance and being like, what does a healthy relationship look like? And if this person who is also my biological father or stepfather, who is in the father role, if they are not just a difficult person, but a destructive person, why are you encouraging me to have a relationship with them when it can wreak havoc and actually cause harm to me and my well-being?
That's what generational abuse is. It's like we keep, we tell kids that this is your dad and he's not great, but he's your dad and you need to accept him for who he is. And you're just setting them up to be adults who accept bad behaviors for whatever reason.
Exactly.
And again, I think therapy is 100% the road to go. I would not have it any other way. But I think we need to re-examine what the goals are that we have for our kids. I went for I'm 3 years out, but really he didn't live with us, I would say, the past 5 years. He took a job out of town. He was never around. I fought tooth and nail every day not to ever say anything bad about him because I believe in that and not bashing. But about a year ago, and when this all went down, 2 years when it all went down and he was messing with them and using the courts, I thought, in what world we don't tell kids not to, okay, so if a guy comes by with a van and candy, as long as he's going to give you something nice, you be nice to him. we warn them when other people are dangerous to them, or when we point out faults, or we tell them to be cautious, but somehow in the court system, or in this everything's nice society that we want to have, we're encouraged not to tell our children the truth. And I don't think that that's fair. And especially, I never did tell the truth. The whole reason this all fell apart is because our daughter combined, who was only 7 at the time, would not see him. I had never said a bad word. I tried to encourage it, and she just said no. And when she said no, he came for me, and he came for me hard. Tried to paint me. And I remember he said to me, "What? She doesn't want to see her dad?" And I was like, I didn't say it because I was afraid of him, but I felt like she doesn't even know you're her dad. And no, you can't just say I'm dad. I've not been around for years. I treat you horribly. But I see you when I want to see you. And that's the way it's going to be because I own you. And that is basically how this all goes down.
Exactly. And there's that level of entitlement. The right, like I have the right to have access to you and treat you however I want because I have this role in your life. However, I'm not taking responsibility for anything that I've done or not done or said. And yet I get to just treat you however I want. My gosh, that it's just such a great picture that you painted of just the parallel of we teach our kids to stay away from strangers and like all those things. And even just thinking of how they intuitively know too. But then when it's so easy to deny their reality, and it is hard. It's hard to figure out and to find the line and be like, how do I tell them truthfully and honestly? That's also age appropriate that they can handle, but where it's not dismissing or minimizing their reality and what is actually true, because they do know whether they have the words for it or not. There's the sense of knowing. And I feel like it sounds like it was kind of this breaking open of, oh my gosh, no, this is your own daughter who's 7, who just was like, absolutely not, I'm done. And then having this realization of, okay, it's not my job to protect him from the choices he's made.
Yeah. It really is. And of all the things that you really like tossle around, maybe not everyone, but that was something that I really, really struggled with. Because I would have done anything to keep that relationship intact. Colin had 4 little kids. I would have given anything for him to be in their lives. I always wanted them to have the security of a father. And I would have done anything. But, when my daughter says to me and the guardian who was in my home, I don't feel safe when I'm with my dad. And I have my son saying he threatened to kill me. There comes a point where some common sense has to take over, and everybody just said, just go along with it. You're not going to get sole custody. Don't talk about him which I didn't. I still don't. I've always told them if they ever want to have a relationship, I will do whatever that takes to facilitate it. And you're not, no door's been closed, but I'm also not going to send them into the den of danger, or tell them that how they feel is not warranted or valid.
That's so good. Yeah. It makes me think of someone I was talking to a few weeks ago. She went through a divorce a few years ago, and it's been pretty rough after the after effects of it. And she said one of the turning points for her was not the question, who would you die for, but who would you live for? And she's like, I will live for my kids. And that was for her a big turning point. I'm willing to go through all this crap and all the mud that's going to be thrown at me for my kids. And I will live and pursue the very hard things, because getting out, it's very difficult. But what I'm really glad that you get to speak on is that it is possible. So I'm just thinking, for the woman listening who feels trapped or scared to start over, what would you want to tell her?
I think that you do have a sense of, again, this is going to get worse. And, I always tell people I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It quite likely will get worse in your own perspective. But one of the greatest things about all of it is that when you are forced to defend yourself, you can take a really hard look at it. And you know that the things that you've done have been out of goodness. You know that you would do anything for your children. You come out better on the other end of it. I think that, you lie awake at night, 2 a.m. in the morning, whether it's because you were fighting about something or just like the overwhelming nature of, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my car. I'm going to lose my friends. I'm going to lose my family. But, when you get to the other side of it, to speak of friends, I was very afraid I was going to lose friends and family. Technically, I suppose I did. But on the other side of it, all I can say is that if your friendship is so fragile with these people that they're willing to not listen to you, not come to you, not give you the floor to speak, and it was so fragile that they're willing to walk away, then you never had them to begin with. They were nothing but keeping you stuck in a position because you were so afraid to lose something you didn't have already. And to speak of money, I will say, yeah, you do kind of have to give away those things that you think you value. But I've always said I would live in a trailer park or homeless rather than to ever live in a home that is so unpredictable and threatening and really just suffocating. My very, very worst day today is 10 times better than my very best day for a decade of just trying to control and maintain and always wondering who's chasing me, what's he going to do, what are people going to know. You live in this constant state of like fire alarms and just keeping it together. And when you can wake up on the other end of it and you're not fighting anyone, happiness is something everyone wants. It's what we all attain. I would give up happiness for peace any day. And I don't mean you can't have happiness without peace. And until you find that peace of just knowing that you will be okay, things aren't going to continue on this path, and you break the cycle, you're just it's like spinning all 24 hours a day. So I guess the only thing I can say is that if you just start small, don't think of the overwhelming nature of, I got to do this, I got to do that. Just take it one day at a time. Like, okay, I'm going to get a side job, I started doing a little bit of writing work so that I at least had some income, and I was putting that away. I shored up my finances. So I was like, okay, well, I don't need this. I don't need that, so that I could look at the big picture and say, like, I actually recognized I was doing it all on my own anyway. And that's what you'll find is that you have told yourself a story that isn't true. And once you step outside of it, you can actually see what's really going on. And I think from that perspective, you will truly wonder why you stayed in it for as long as you did.
I think it's really helpful to have the reality of what this does look like, and not, like you said, to not sugarcoat this, but to understand, yeah, it will get worse, quote unquote. However, it will get so much better. There's nothing that can really replace finally having peace in your life when you've been so used to chaos and fearing for your life in so many ways. One of the thoughts and questions I have too is, you mentioned it earlier, how it takes an average of 7 attempts to leave. What would you say are some of the essential pieces to have in place to give someone the best chance of actually getting out, where it doesn't have to take 7 times? But like, what are some of those essential pieces they need?
One big one for me was to commit. And when I say commit, like, tell your friends, tell your family, because I think when you first split up, you're like, I don't want anyone to know. But I think there's that illusion in the back of your head. You really don't want people to know because you were afraid you are going to go back and you don't want people to judge you. If you commit and you tell people in your life, this is what I'm doing, and you draw a line in the sand, you're going to hold yourself accountable, and you're going to have to face the music when they do come back. And I think that's one of the hardest things, because I hid it. I would tell people, oh, everything's fine at home. So when we separated, I didn't want anyone to know. It was like a hush. But you're still keeping the secrecy of it. I think once you rip off that bandage and you commit to it with everyone, children included, because that's what we always try and shield our kids from.
Yeah.
There's no turning back then. Stop giving yourself a way to turn back. And I think I kept leaving that door open. If I do this and he comes back, well, then we're meant to be. Or I was always leaving that option on the table. And I think you really have to take that option off the table. And I think another thing is when you're experiencing your worst moments, a minute where you admit it to yourself, where you fall apart, where you say all the things you feel that you've been holding inside, video those things. I mean, I have a 24-year-old girl that I help, with our charity, and she sent me a video that she did of herself sitting in a hotel room while her husband took her child. And she was talking to herself, and she just kept saying, like, don't take him back. Look at, and it struck me. And I know, had I done that myself, all those times when you're weak and they're sending you messages just to like get you back on the hook, or they're showing up places or whatever it is, just having that proof in your hand that you can look and you can remember how bad it was, because it's like childbirth. You forget how bad it is, so you don't get pulled back into it, because you're always going to forget the hardest times, but you have to force yourself to remember them during the best of times, so you never go back.
Right. Yeah. It's basically inviting people in to help you, give you strength for those moments you don't have it, and being able to, I love what you said of no more keeping the door open and the option of return, by keeping it to yourself. And then it's still this inner warring going on of like, do I not know? I know I'm not going to, but then it's just this uncertainty and this perpetual uncertainty that you're living in. So being able to invite people in, friends, trusted people, it's just this like, okay, I've said it. And now when I am weak, I need you to help me in that sense, to not keep wavering and going back and forth. And I love this example of the video as something that she could practically come back to remember, because we get amnesia. It's easy to forget and doubt. And then especially when they work the charm and they turn that on and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot it was all great. I don't know what I was freaking out about.
Right. It wasn't that bad.
Like, yeah, it wasn't that bad.
I just went through a really hard patch there for a bit.
Exactly.
And I did. I was watching her and remembering myself in it. And we can all remember ourselves, but we try and push all of that away because it's too painful. It's much easier to feel the goodness of, oh, this is doable than, in any relationship, whether you lose somebody the way I did my first husband, or you lose the illusion of having a relationship that is healthy, because you do continue to pretend to yourself that it's manageable and it's doable and it's good for you. And once you actually lose that relationship and recognize that you never had it, that's when it really is, the hardest part about it.
That's such a great point. Exactly. Yeah. And as we are coming to a close, I know that you've written at least a couple of books that I've heard you talk about. And I think there's another one that's about to be published at some point here in the near future. So could you just share with us what those books are and where people could find you to connect with you and learn more?
If you go to my website, which is juliebarthauthor.com, there's links there for my daughter's art, and all the proceeds from her art go to fund my charity, which is called the Colin James Barth Outreach. We help women in crisis through counseling and providing resources. My first book is called Notes from a Blackberry, and it's a story of Colin and Tatum, and that ends with his passing. The second book is called From Blackberries to Thorns, and that's coming out hopefully very soon. And that's the second situation with my second husband. So those two are available anywhere books are sold. There's also an audio version if you're not a book person, because I hate to admit I'm not a book person.
I love that. Yeah, I find it's just, I can get through so many more books, audio, and I can retain it a little bit better. So that's amazing. That's so neat that that's also out on Audible. Wow, Julie, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share your story. And I'm very excited to get to put this out there just for any woman who finds herself in a similar situation that you were in. And also just that you're an amazing resource and you have additional resources available to help someone who's in that situation. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. And if anyone reaches out, I'm the person that mans the website, so I can help.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And if this episode spoke to you, please share it with another woman who needs to know that she's not alone and that healing is possible. Thank you so much for listening, friend. I cannot wait to talk with you next time. Thanks for listening to Let's Get Real. If you've been feeling stretched thin, stuck in survival mode, or like you've lost yourself in motherhood, I made something just for you. It's called the Overwhelmed Mom's Guide, and it's totally free. Inside, I walk you through simple steps to help you reconnect with who you are, find a bit more breathing room in your day, and start to feel like you again. You can grab it now. Just click the link in the show notes. You don't have to keep doing this alone. Let's take the next step together.